Okay, before we get started here, because I see Kayla and Trenton laughing back there, I'm not old, okay? And that you started this, not you, Ken, Paula. But I know you noticed me limping up here, and it's just because I've done basketball all week and I laid down tile. So yeah, my knees have took a licking this week. So I just want you to, I'm all right. I'll be okay and I'll make it through. So I'm looking forward to Wednesday because after Wednesday, there's no more. It's like the song, work till the night is over, and it's going to be over Wednesday. So at least for a week and a half. Thank you so much for being here tonight. It's great to have a good audience that we have. We have visitors, and thank you so much for coming our way. And I hope that the message that I bring to you here tonight is encouraging and edifying to you. And let me say, I do want to say thank you so much. If you're not here, you're listening to me at home, and I'm kind of calling the minors out on this because I got a message during this week on social media. It was nice to hear me at home, but if you look at the picture, it shows a picture of me preaching, and the picture in the inset is Max. And I told Tracy, I said, I hope you don't think I preach about my dog all the time, because I don't. It was just an example that I used. So, but I hope you'll be encouraged by this message. I hope you'll the things that we hear tonight, it's talking about stop making excuses. And I encouraged Ken there to lead a song about how we have an opportunity to do things right here, right now. And sometimes we like to excuse ourselves from doing these things because we believe that there is a better day. There's a more convenient day. There's a day of opportunity that will be better for me to do it then than it is now. And I thought about this during this week, and it came to the thought about Moses. And if you see where Moses goes to the burning bush, and he is kind of just shocked and surprised that here is a bush that's not being consumed, even though it's on fire. It's not being consumed by this fire. And we see that God kind of interacts with him, and he is he reminds Moses that here's a situation that's going on with my people, God's people, that they are going through some hard times, they're going through some suffering, and it's not like the days of Joseph, where Joseph and Egypt kind of worked hand in hand. Now it's really just Egypt, and now they are worried that these people of Moses, these people of Abraham, they're going to consume the land, so therefore they're going to put oppression on them. And we see that God saw it was not fitting for the people to go into this idea of oppression. So he wants his people to leave and go somewhere where they could be his people in a land that is truly their own. But they have to have someone to be kind of the instrument in starting all this. And he goes to Moses. And you'll see as we go on here in Exodus chapter 3 and also in Exodus chapter 4, he kind of starts making excuses. And we may look at this tonight and we say that that's the same thing that we do as individuals. And may I encourage you tonight, when we look at these things, maybe examine oneself, as the Apostle Paul reminds us, and ask, do we need to stop making excuses and start doing it? And I told you there last week, Michael Jordan made millions of dollars from a little slogan called "Just Do It," and it was not ask any questions, not go to a committee, not go and think that this was okay. If it was right before the eyes of God, be like Michael Jordan and just go ahead and do it, because God's not going to be displeased at this. God's going to encourage you to do this. And may I encourage you to think about these things here tonight. The one thing that he asked first and foremost, he asked God, who am I to go before this great king and ask for these people to be let go? If you look there in Exodus chapter 3, verse 11, he says, who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? And maybe we try to sell ourselves short because we say, how can I, just this little insignificant person, do anything out in this world significant? And sometimes when we look at the world today, we think that we can't do nothing. This morning I preached on a message about how we look how great this world is, and because this world has a lot of people that don't know God, there's a lot of people that know a little bit of God but don't know anything about his will, or there's some people that struggle with God and don't know how to continue the faith like they should, and then there's those ones that always works on their faith, and it takes a toll on them. And we got to be mindful how great the harvest really is. And don't sell yourself short that when it comes to you being the laborer, that you can't do anything. I remember I would never ever lead a song in service. And I was nervous, and even when I started preaching, I was nervous. And I can remember a lady sitting behind me, and it was a singing night. And I remember she came up to me, and she just made one simple statement. Jay, I encourage you to lead a song tonight. I can't even tell you what song it was, to be honest with you. But I can remember doing it after that. And after I did one, I did two. And after I did two, I did a song service. After that, I did it every opportunity I had. And what I want to encourage you to think about is how it just takes this little sentence of just a handful of words to start something. And don't think that because you are in some kind of scenario where the world looks at you as significant, God looks at you as something great. And once again, as I said last week, don't sell yourself short that you're something inferior to this world. Because if you say to yourself that you're nothing important, then the Christ's sacrifice on the cross means nothing of importance either. Because he looks at you as something important. I look at 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 12 through 16. When you look at the Apostle Paul, he tells him about how here is this individual that Paul is trying to encourage Timothy to be. And Timothy is going to be excused for one reason and one reason only, his youth. If you follow along, really, in 1 Timothy chapter 4, if you look through the history of Timothy, he's not really a young guy like Lydia. He's not around Lydia's age. He's not around, may not even be around Trenton's age. He might be even older than him. But he is considered by others, his peers, as someone young. And Paul says, don't let this be the excuse for you not to do anything. And he encouraged him to continue in that word, to work on this and work on these things that you have worked on, that you took dedication on, and don't stop doing it. Because if you're able to do this, that factor, your age, is never going to come up. Guys, how many times have we looked at an athlete and we've excused his shortcomings because he's pretty talented? I mean, we see it happen all the time in sports. When we look at an individual that has been a leader of our country, we have looked at some of their shortcomings because they have overcome them with many great things. And what I'm trying to get at here is, don't think that because that there is some kind of factor that you look that's going to hold you back, God said it's going to help you. There was a young man one time that he repented of his sins in a public nature. And one of the things that he repented of, and I may have told this story before, that he repented because he got a speeding ticket. And maybe some individuals in this audience think, well, I can understand why he came forward. Some of you may say, well, that's not really important. Everybody speeds. Everybody gets in trouble. Or people get in trouble sometimes. No big deal to look at. But the thing I was encouraged about is his conscience. Whether it was right or wrong for him to do that doesn't matter. His conscience made him try to make things right before the eyes of God. And when I see a young man do that, the thing that comes to my mind is, what am I doing? When you see an individual that is willing to sing songs louder than you, maybe we all ask ourselves, what am I doing? Or when you see an individual that is constrained to do something right before the eyes of God, and you're really kind of just watching, you ask yourself, what are you doing? Don't be afraid of who you are. And don't be afraid to build somebody up. Rather, we all need it. We all need to be built up. We all need to be encouraged. We all need to have something that keeps us going in the faith. And I may need it tonight, and I may need it next week, and I may need it the next week after that. But be mindful of how those great things of encouragement can help go a long way. All we need is that. I had a friend in Payton City named Roger Smith. And he was an individual that always stood back in the auditorium, back in the foyer. He was the first one you saw when you came in. He was the last individual you saw before he went out. And I can remember one time I went forward to repent of sin. And I was very young at the time, and I felt very ashamed of the things I'd done wrong. And I can remember going forward and asking for forgiveness. And the first thing I wanted to do, I wanted to get out that door because I didn't want to hear anybody tell me, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. But guess what? I didn't get out the door because Roger was standing right back there. He didn't shake my hand. Instead, he hugged me. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. And it's just because he was there. Brethren, think about that when it comes to individuals standing out that door there. They're not standing there to make sure that you're not taking hymnals out of the church building. They're doing it because they are concerned for your soul. They want to make sure things are going to be all right when you come in that building and when you get out that building. And that's just one small example of what we can do. Maybe you can sign a card. Maybe you can send a card to someone. Maybe you can send a text to someone. I don't know about you, but I send texts all week long. And I send messages all week long. And it's just because I am concerned about individuals. It's not because it's in my job description. It's because it is, as a Christian. We got to be mindful of this. And don't think that because you are some insignificant individual that in the eyes of God you are just the same. You're not. And then he goes on in Exodus chapter 3, verse 13, and he says to him, "What shall I say?" Moses said unto God, he says, "Behold, when I come to the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, the God of your fathers have sent me unto you, and they shall say unto me, what is his name? What shall I say unto them?" And you may say to yourself, well, that's kind of a no-brainer, Moses. Tell them that you are the God. And if you look how he says, tell them that I am, in capital letters. And the reason why he wants them to be reminded of this one God is because they is infested with idolatry. If you ever take the opportunity to look at the plagues that happens in Egypt, remember every plague can be dedicated to a god, including the death of the firstborn. And that belongs to Pharaoh. And it's because he thought himself as a god. And this is the idea that we get from the very beginning when it comes to that rod eating becoming a serpent and eating the other serpents that has been mimicked by their magicians. And it's to show that there is this one true God, and anything that comes that way is going to be destroyed. And he didn't only show it through those serpents, he showed it also through the plagues. And God reminds him, he goes, I am on your side. Don't worry about what you say. As long as I'm with you, that doesn't matter. They need to know that there is one God. And brethren, there is people today that do not believe in that one true God. We kind of get exhausted sometimes talking about denominationalism. But that is a very sad problem that we have today, that we are so divided. Even the Apostle Paul reminds us over unimportant matters, and he asks the rhetorical question, is Christ divided among you? And remember what was over. Who baptized who? He says, I'm glad to baptize any of you because you are making individuals bigger than what this is supposed to be about. We have a very bad problem of being divided today, and we even see it come down within our own church. And if you don't think so, think about some of the things we're divided over now. We're divided over the Lord's Supper. We're divided over instrumental music. We're divided over how we spend the Lord's money. We're divided over translations. We're divided over how we have services in a Sunday or Wednesday setting. We are divided over how we about the Trinity. We're divided about just so many things. We're also divided over transubstantiation. If you know what that means, that's the idea that this is literally the blood and body of Jesus Christ. We're divided over that. And that's within the denomination, if you will, of the Church of Christ. We're not talking about even the things outside the body that we're divided on. But we have become a problem just like that. Brethren, there's a lot of things that we need to say. And brethren, even at my young age, there's a lot of things that I need to do before I die. And it's because we got to get this message out. If we really care about souls, if we really care about the heavenly hope, if we're really wanting to try to tell someone about these things, we need to get on the page and start talking about it. You think about the hobbies and the things that we like, and we will talk in a moment's notice. We could talk about our fantasy football teams. We could talk about the newest movie that comes out, or the latest book we've read, or we could talk about the music that we listen to and some of the things that we listened to back in the day. And we could tell you when a song comes out, I can remember what year, what side and what track it was when that song came out. And we could go very detailed into that. And we could talk about in an instant. And I'm not telling you to give up that, but I'm telling you, how well are you when it comes to the gospel? What shall you say? Well, you need to start talking about God. And then here comes this situation. And sometimes we look at this as the kind of the doubter that will stop us from doing anything. And it says, suppose they won't believe me. Exodus chapter 4, verse 1, Moses answered and said, but Lord, behold, they will come, believe me, and they will hearken unto my voice, for they will say, the Lord hath not appeared unto thee. And before even Moses has an opportunity to say anything or actually see some of the more cooler things that God's going to be able to help him out, he's already trying to excuse himself from not doing anything. And sometimes that is a thing that we're afraid of the most, is rejection. We don't want someone telling us no. It's only 2 little letters. But we succumb to those 2 little letters, something fierce. We're afraid to be told no. We're afraid someone is going to hurt our feelings when we're told no. Maybe I told this before, but one of the first gospel meetings I had, it was over at Hartshorn Ridge over in Ohio. And I can remember that night, and there was a guy that came in. He looked like the thin version of Santa Claus. He was probably about the size of Dan Shea, but he had a big white beard, and he was probably in his 60s, maybe hitting his mid-60s. And he came in the door, and I got a chance to talk to him, and I can remember the God had brought him. He says, he was working at my farm today, and I told him we had a gospel meeting, and I asked him if he wanted to go. And then he said this next. What's he going to say to me? No? When you don't have intimidation like that, you don't let this be a situation where you say, well, what if he says no? Brethren, believe it or not, when you go out here and proclaim this message, some people is just not going to listen. You just got to accept that. Sometimes you're going to have people that you really, really like or you're really close to, and you're going to proclaim this message to them, and they're going to reject it. And it's going to hurt. Brethren, there's going to be some times that you have really heavily invested in someone, and then at a moment's notice, they're going to be overtaken by a friend or family member and tell them that's not the right way. But keep in mind, dear brethren, what Jesus reminds us when he went and sent out disciples. Move on. He tells you to sow, but he doesn't tell you to water. He doesn't tell you to harvest or give the increase. But he does tell you to sow. And sometimes we got to be mindful that something that you have sown, you need to let someone else water. You don't need to do it all. You need someone else to do that, and you also need to let God give the increase. If you force feed it down their throat, they're going to likely reject it. But don't be afraid to sow it. And don't be afraid of the rejection. Jesus Christ, who has come down here on earth, and they have seen miracles, and they have heard the teachings, and some of the things that they have said about Jesus, they said, it can't be anyone else but the Messiah. It can't be anybody else other than the son of David, the son of Abraham. It's got to be him. And even when they have seen these things and heard these things, they still didn't believe. And the individual of all perfection that we see here on earth, what did they want to do with him? They wanted to kill him. So may I encourage you the next time when you want to talk to somebody and you say, well, what if they say no? Jesus heard it all the time. The Apostle Paul heard it all the time. Peter heard it all the time. So what will be your excuse now? When you see these individuals that are just like you, and Jesus is referred to us as we are those adopted sons. Jesus is the true Son of God. Paul tells us in Romans that we are the adopted sons of God. Don't be afraid to go out and be like your brethren. And then we go on to the next excuse, where he goes on in verse 10 and he says, I am slow of speech, I am slow of tongue. He says, O Lord, my Lord, I am not eloquent, and neither herefore, nor since thou hast spoken unto thy servant, but I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Wow, the Apostle Paul was the same way. Peter was just a fisherman. You ever notice that of all the apostles that have been chosen by Christ, are they scribes? Are they Pharisees? Are they individuals that knew the law and wrote the law? Average individuals. Matthew was a tax collector. Simon was a zealot, which means that he was kind of against Matthew if you think about it. Peter, James, and John were fishermen. Average individuals. And probably are not like the greatest of Pharisees and not like the greatest of scribes, but they still went and proclaimed a message. And remember how these things have been responded by Peter, James, and John and these other apostles. It says, are these not the same guys that came from Jerusalem? Are these not different from anybody else that we have ever heard? And remember how Jesus was just this carpenter that was in Bethlehem. And they said, isn't this not the same guy that came out of this area? We say to ourselves, we have these kind of deficiencies, but we don't. Now, there for a while, every time my hockey team will lose, I'd get a message from Gideon and Solomon to remind me that my team lost. And of course, the conclusion comes, I laugh. Well, kind of. Sometimes I cry too. But it was just really cool that these two young boys will send me a message. They're not the best of speakers. Actually, it was last time I got was a picture of a TV screen where Gideon was pointing at the score. And I made the conclusion what he was trying to say. But look how it's just something as simple as that. I had a young lady, and I apologize if I told this story before. We had a lady that fell away from the faith probably about 15 years ago. And there was a night at Fairmont that it was just seemed like it was just downright difficult. Kids were restless. They were the age of Paula's kids. They were just really restless. They was going all over the place. And I was like, kids, please, I'm trying to get a sermon ready tonight. Please sit down and behave, and let me try to get this prepared, get it up here on the screen. That way everybody can see it when I preach here tonight. And sure enough, the lady that I never got an opportunity to talk to, when she left everybody and didn't talk to anybody, walked through that door. There she was. Wasn't expecting it. Wasn't looking forward to it. Was so focused on my message. Here she comes. And I did remind her of how she hurt my feelings. I did remind her of how much I've missed her, and didn't remind her about what I think she'd done wrong. I don't care anymore. She is here. That's all that mattered. I didn't need to tell her anything else. I never really got to really say anything to her. I cried the whole time because she was here. Brother, I didn't take any well-prepared speech when she walked through the door. But she did know I was happy to see her. Brethren, we don't have to have some kind of well-versed speech in order for someone to change their hearts or change their minds. All they really need is you. One of the things, as I've probably said here before as well, Job's friends got one thing right, and then they got a whole mess of things wrong. The one thing they did get right is when they went and saw Job and they couldn't recognize him, they just sat there for 3 days and said nothing. Just was there for them. When they opened their mouth is when the problem started. Sometimes our speech and our tongue doesn't need to be involved. Just let them know that we're here. Finally, chapter 4, verse 13. It said, O Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him who thou wilt send. And what he is saying here, and I put this in an easy to read version, is he says, Lord, please send someone else. I told you, who am I to do this? I don't know what to say, and I don't think they'll believe me. And what I say to them may not be the right thing to say. So please send someone else. If you ever want to see God really angry, read the next verse. If you want to see Satan have a field day with this, go to the next verse. Because this is where you see God become angry. He is angry because this guy, who is going to be the one that's going to be talked about for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, that guy didn't really want to do this to begin with. And God is angry at that because he is something of importance to him. And here he is making all these excuses to go Find someone else to do this. No, I have chosen you. There's so much confusion when we see in the world today when they talk about God's elect and God's chosen. That's you. If you look at Colossians chapter 3 and you go throughout that whole chapter, he is telling us about what you can do as the elect of church. You are this chosen generation. You are this royal priesthood, Peter reminds us. You are a peculiar people. You are special. And because God has decided for you to be a part of this, do something. And he tells us a variety of ways in Colossians about what you can do. We say to ourselves, because we don't stand in a pulpit, or we don't lead a song, or we don't lead a prayer, we don't help with the Lord's Supper, we don't teach Bible class, we say to ourselves, well, there's nothing really we can do. Baloney. Sometimes it's just as simple as having a get-together and having a Chinese gift-giving exchange. Sometimes it's just as simple as texting somebody, which Harold's not here tonight, and I had to text him and tell him that he is on the brink of fantasy football. I don't know, on the brink of fantasy football championship, but I had to tell him because I told him, I was like, it's funny being here without you being here to gloat. But brethren, just be careful and consider yourself important and consider yourself something of greatness. And ask not what the church could do for you, but what you could do for the church. Remember John F. Kennedy made that very famous statement, ask not what your country could do for you, but what you could do for your country. And we take that kind of statement and we say, how powerful is that maybe I should do something in part of that. And people turn to this guy from this kind of a statement. But brethren, don't be afraid when God has asked you through his holy word to do something. Don't be afraid to do it. Something as simple as an individual texting me and saying, hey, I've been thinking about this. I think there's something more I can do, Dan Shea. To a point where we said, hey, let's go to Florida. It's simple as that. As we close out here, there is things that we see Jesus will ask us to do. He talks about service of foot washing there in Matthew chapter 24, if I'm not mistaken. And he tells them as he is washing their feet that the reason why he does is he wants to show that the master is willing to serve others. And he wants his others to serve as well. And he tells them this is an example unto you that you should wash other people's feet. And if we hold on to this example that we see of Jesus washing his servants or washing his apostles' feet, and we say that's something encouraging and mindful that I need to replicate the things that Jesus wants me to replicate, be mindful what else that he has asked us to do. Make disciples of all nations. Baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Teach them to observe all things that I've done, or I have told you, and lo, I'll be with you even unto the end. We have an opportunity to do those things here tonight. Maybe you need to repent of sin. Maybe you need to be buried in baptism. Maybe you need to pray about things that you need to be a better individual, a better child of God. Maybe you need to work on these things and you need prayer to help you with that. All these things are available for you here right now. And we have the opportunity to do something here tonight. Don't wait for some more convenient day because maybe that day never comes. But if you need to respond, let's do so right here, right now. Won't you come while we stand?